Fire Watch, July 4th, 1952. Watchmen, what of the night? The night, O my Lord, is a time of freedom. You have seen the morning and the night was better. In the night all things began, and in the night the end of all things has come before me. Baptized in the rivers of night, Gethsemane has recovered her innocence. Darkness brings a semblance of order before all things disappear. With the clock slung over my shoulder in the silence of the 4th of July, it is my time to be the night watchman in the house that will one day perish. Here is the way it is when I go on the fire watch. Before 8 o'clock, the monks are packed in the belly of the great heat, singing to the Mother of God like exiles sailing to their slavery, hoping for glory. The night angelus unlocks the church and sets them free. The holy monster, which is the community, divides itself into segments and disperses through the airless cloisters where yellow lamps do not attract the bugs. The watchman's clock, together with the watchman's sneakers, are kept in a box, together with a flashlight and the keys to various places, at the foot of the infirmary stairs. Rumors behind me and above me and around me signalize the fathers going severally to bed in different dormitories. Where there is cold water, some stay to drink from celluloid cups. Thus we fight the heat. I take the heavy clock and sling it on its strap over my shoulder. I walk to the nearest window on my silent feet. I recite the second nocturne of Saturday, sitting outside the window in the dark garden, and the house begins to be silent. One late father, with a change of dry clothes slung over his shoulder, stops to look out the window and pretends to be frightened when he sees me sitting around the corner in the dark, holding the breviary in the yellow light of the window, saying the Psalms of Saturday. It is 10 or 15 minutes before there are no more feet echoing along the cloisters, shuffling up the stairs. When you go late to the dormitories, you have to take off your shoes and make your way to bed in socks, as if the others were already sleeping in such weather. At 8:15, I sit in darkness. I sit in human silence. Then I begin to hear the eloquent night, the night of wet trees, with moonlight sliding over the shoulder of the church in a haze of dampness and subsiding heat. The world of this night resounds from heaven to hell with animal eloquence, with the savage innocence of a million unknown creatures. While the earth eases and cools off like a huge, wet, living thing, the enormous vitality of their music pounds and rings and throbs and echoes until it gets into everything and swamps the whole world in its neutral madness, which never becomes an orgy because all things are innocent, all things are pure. Nor would I have mentioned the possibility of evil, except that I remember how the heat and the wild music of living things can drive people crazy when they are not in monasteries, and make them do things which the world has forgotten how to lament. That is why some people act as if the night and the forest and the heat and the animals had in them something of contagion, whereas the heat is holy, and the animals are the children of God, and the night was never made to hide sin, but only to open infinite distances to charity and send our souls to play beyond the stars. 8:30. I begin my round in the cellar of the south wing. The place is full of naked wires, stinks of the hides of slaughtered calves. My feet are walking on a floor of earth, down a long catacomb, at the end of which there is a brand new locked door into the guest wing that was only finished the other day. So I punch the clock for the first time in the catacomb. I turn my back on the new wing, and the fire watch is on. Around one corner is a hole in the wall with a vat where they stew fruit. Under this vat, Dom Frederick told me to burn all the letters that were in the pigeonholes of the room where he had been prior. Around another corner is an old furnace where I burned the rest of the papers from the same room. In this musty silence, which no longer smells of wine, because the winery is now in another building, the flashlight creates a little alert tennis ball upon the walls and floor. Concrete now begins under the watchman's cat feet, and moonlight reaches through the windows into a dark place with jars of prunes and applesauce on all the shelves. Then suddenly, after the old, brooding catacomb, you hit something dizzy and new. The kitchen, painted by the brother novices, each wall in a different color. Some of the monks complained of the different colored walls, but a watchman has no opinions. There is tile under the shining vats, and the scripture close to the ceiling, "Little children, love one another." There are blue benches in the scullery, and this one room is cool. Sometimes when you go up the stairs making no noise, a brother comes in late from the barns through the kitchen door and runs into you by surprise in the darkness, blinded by the flashlight, and, if a novice, he's probably scared to death. For a few feet, the way is most familiar. I am in the little cloister, which is the monastery's main stem. It goes from the places where the monks live to the places where they pray. But now it is empty, and like everything else, it is a lot nicer when there is nobody there. The steps down to the tailor shop have a different sound. They drum under my rubber soles. I run into the smell of duck and cotton, mixed with the smell of bread. There is light in the bakery, and someone is working late around the corner behind the oven. I punch the clock by the bakery door. It is the second station. The third station is the hottest one, the furnace room. This time the stairs don't drum, they ring. They are iron. I fight my way through the jungle of wet clothes drying in the heat and go down by the flanks of the boiler to the third station, which is there up against the bricks, beneath an engraving of the Holy Face. After that, I am in the choir novitiate. Here, too, it is hot. The place is swept and recently painted, and there are notice boards at every turn in the little crooked passageways where each blue door is named after a saint. Long lists of appointments for the novices' confessions and direction. Sentences from the liturgy. Fragments of severe and necessary information. But the walls of the building have their own stuffy smell, and I'm suddenly haunted by my first days in religion, the freezing tough winter when I first received the habit and always had a cold, the smell of frozen straw in the dormitory under the chapel, and the deep unexpected ecstasy of Christmas, that first Christmas when you have nothing left in the world but God. It's when you hit the novitiate that the fire watch begins in earnest. Alone, silent, wandering on your appointed rounds through the corridors of a huge sleeping monastery, you come around the corner and find yourself face to face with your monastic past and with the mystery of your vocation. The fire watch is an examination of conscience, in which your task as watchman suddenly appears in its true light, a pretext devised by God to isolate you and to search your soul with lamps and questions in the heart of darkness. God, my God, God whom I meet in darkness, with you it is always the same thing, always the same question that nobody knows how to answer. I have prayed to you in the daytime with thoughts and reasons, and in the nighttime you have confronted me, scattering thought and reason. I have come to you in the morning with light and with desire, and you have descended upon me with great gentleness, with most forbearing silence, in this inexplicable night, dispersing light, defeating all desire. I have explained to you 100 times my motives for entering the monastery, and you have listened and said nothing, and I have turned away and wept with shame. Is it true that all my motives have meant nothing? Is it true that all my desires were an illusion? While I am asking questions which you do not answer, you ask me a question which is so simple that I cannot answer. I do not even understand the question. This night and every night, it is the same question. There is a special living resonance in these steep, hollow stairs to the novitiate chapel, where you are all alone, the windows closed tight upon you, shutting you up with the heat of the lost afternoon. Here, when it is winter, I used to come after dinner, when I was a novice, heavy with sleep and with potatoes, and kneel all the time, because that was the only period in which we were allowed to do what we liked. Nothing ever happened, but that was what I liked. Here, on Sunday mornings, a crowd of us would try to make the way of the cross, jostling one another among the benches, and on days of recollection in summer, we would kneel here all afternoon, with the sweat running down our ribs, while candles burned all around the tabernacle, and the veiled ciborium stood shyly in the doorway, peeping out at us between the curtains. And here, now, by night, with this huge clock ticking on my right hip, and the flashlight in my hand, and sneakers on my feet, I feel as if everything had been unreal. It is as if the past had never existed. The things I thought were so important, because of the effort I put into them, have turned out to be of small value. And the things I never thought about, the things I was never able either to measure or to expect, were the things that mattered. There used to be a man who walked down the back road singing on summer mornings, right in the middle of the novices' Thanksgiving after communion, singing his own private song, every day the same. It was the sort of song you would expect to hear out in the country, in the knobs of Kentucky. But in this darkness, I would not be able to say for certain what it was that mattered. That, perhaps, is part of your unanswerable question. Only I remember the heat in the bean field the first June I was here, and I get the same sense of a mysterious, unsuspected value that struck me after Father Alberic's funeral. After the novitiate, I come back into the little cloister. Soon I stand at the coolest station, down in the brothers' washroom at the door of the ceramic studio. Cool winds come in from the forest through the big, wide-open windows. This is a different city, with a different set of associations. The ceramic studio is something relatively new. Behind the door, where they burnt out one kiln and brought in a new one, little Father John of God suddenly made a good crucifix just a week ago. He is one of my scholastics. And I think of the clay Christ that came out of his heart. I think of the beauty and the simplicity and the pathos that were sleeping there, waiting to become an image. I think of this simple and mysterious child and of all my other scholastics. What is waiting to be born in all their hearts? Suffering? Deception? Heroism? Defeat? Peace? Betrayal? Sanctity? Death? Glory? On all sides I am confronted by questions that I cannot answer, because the time for answering them has not yet come. Between the silence of God and the silence of my own soul stands the silence of the souls entrusted to me. Immersed in these three silences, I realize that the questions I ask myself about them are perhaps no more than a surmise, and perhaps the most urgent and practical renunciation is the renunciation of all questions. The most poignant thing about the fire watch is that you go through Gethsemane not only in length and height, but also in depth. You hit strange caverns in the monastery's history, layers set down by the years, geological strata. You feel like an archaeologist, suddenly unearthing ancient civilizations. But the terrible thing is that you yourself have lived through those ancient civilizations. The house has changed so much that 10 years have as many different meanings as 10 Egyptian dynasties. The meanings are hidden in the walls. They mumble in the floor under the watchmen's rubber feet. The lowest layer is at once in the catacomb, under the south wing and in the church tower. Every other level of history is found in between. The church. In spite of the stillness, the huge place seems alive. Shadows move everywhere around the small, uncertain area of light which the sanctuary light casts on the gospel side of the altar. There are faint sounds in the darkness. The empty choir stalls creak, and hidden boards mysteriously sigh. The silence of the sacristy has its own sound. I shoot the beam of light down to St. Malachy's altar and the relic cases. Vestments are laid out for my Mass tomorrow at Our Lady of Victory's altar. Keys rattle again in the door, and the rattle echoes all over the church. When I was first on for the fire watch, I thought the church was full of people praying in the dark, but no. The night is filled with unutterable murmurs, the walls with traveling noises, which seem to wake up and come back hours after something has happened, to gibber at the places where it happened. This nearness to you in the darkness is too simple and too close for excitement. It is commonplace for all things to live an unexpected life in the nighttime. But their life is illusory and unreal. The illusion of sound only intensifies the infinite substance of your silence. Here, in this place where I made my vows, where I had my hands anointed for the holy sacrifice, where I have had your priesthood seal the depth and intimate summit of my being, a word, a thought would defile the quiet of your inexplicable love. Your reality, O God, speaks to my life as to an intimate, in the midst of a crowd of fictions. I mean, these walls, this roof, these arches, this overhead ridiculously large and unsubstantial tower. Lord God, the whole world tonight seems to be made out of paper. The most substantial things are ready to crumble or tear apart and blow away. How much more so this monastery, which everybody believes in, and which has perhaps already ceased to exist. Oh God, my God, the night has values that day has never dreamed of. All things stir by night, waking or sleeping, conscious of the nearness of their ruin. Only man makes himself illuminations he conceives to be solid and eternal. But while we ask our questions and come to our decisions, God blows our decisions out. The roofs of our houses cave in upon us. The tall towers are undermined by ants. The walls crack and cave in. The holiest buildings burn to ashes. while the watchman is composing a theory of duration. Now is the time to get up and go to the tower. Now is the time to meet you, God, where the night is wonderful, where the roof is almost without substance under my feet, where all the mysterious junk in the belfry considers the proximate coming of 3 new bells, where the forest opens out under the moon, and the living things sing terribly that only the present is eternal, and that all things having a past and a future are doomed to pass away. This, then, is the way from the floor of the church to the platform of the tower. First, I must make a full round of the house on the 2nd floor. Then I must go to the 3rd floor dormitories. After that, the tower. Cloister. Soft feet. Total darkness. The brothers have torn up the tent in the cloister garden, where the novices were sleeping 2 winters ago, and where some of them got pneumonia. Just yesterday they put a new door on Father Abbott's room while he was away with Dom Gabriel, visiting the foundations. I am in the corridor under the old guest house. In the middle of the hallway, a long table is set with knives and forks and spoons and bowls for the breakfast of the postulants and family brothers. 3 times a day they eat in the corridor. For 2 years there has been no other place to put them. The high light door in the old guest wing swings back and I am on the stairs. I had forgotten that the upper floors were empty. The silence astonishes me. The last time I was on the fire watch, there was a retreat party of 50 lined up on the 2nd floor, signing their names in the guest register in the middle of the night. They had just arrived in a bus from Notre Dame. Now the place is absolutely empty. All the notices are off the walls. The bookshelf has vanished from the hall. The population of holy statues has been diminished. All the windows are wide open. Moonlight falls on the cool linoleum floor. The doors of some of the rooms are open, and I can see that they are empty. I can feel the emptiness of all the rest. I would like to stop and stand here for an hour, just to feel the difference. The house is like a sick person who has recovered. This is the Gethsemane that I entered, and whose existence I had almost forgotten. It was this silence, this darkness, this emptiness that I walked into with Brother Matthew 11 years ago this spring. This is the house that seemed to have been built to be remote from everything, to have forgotten all cities, to be absorbed in the eternal years. But this recovered innocence has nothing reassuring about it. The very silence is a reproach. The emptiness itself is my most terrible question. If I have broken this silence, and if I have been to blame for talking so much about this emptiness that it came to be filled with people, who am I to praise the silence anymore? Who am I to publicize this emptiness? Who am I to remark on the presence of so many visitors, so many retreatants, so many postulants, so many tourists? Or have the men of our age acquired a Midas touch of their own, so that as soon as they succeed, everything they touch becomes crowded with people? In this age of crowds, in which I have determined to be a solitary, perhaps the greatest sin would be to lament the presence of people on the threshold of my solitude. Can I be so blind as to ignore that solitude is itself their greatest need? And yet if they rush in upon the desert in thousands, how shall they be alone? What went they out into the desert to see? Whom did I myself come here to find but you, O Christ, who have compassion on the multitudes? Nevertheless, your compassion singles out and separates the one on whom your mercy falls, and sets him apart from the multitudes, even though you leave him in the midst of the multitudes. With my feet on the floor I waxed when I was a postulant, I ask these useless questions. With my hand on the key by the door to the tribune, where I first heard the monks chanting the psalms, I do not wait for an answer, because I have begun to realize you never answer when I expect. The third room of the library is called Hell. It is divided up by wall-board partitions into 4 small sections full of condemned books. The partitions are hung with American flags and pictures of Dom Edmund Albrecht. I thread my way through this unbelievable maze to the second room of the library, where the retreatants used to sit and mop their brows and listen to sermons. I do not have to look at the corner where the books about the Carthusians once sang to me their siren song, as I sail past with clock ticking and lights swinging and keys in my hand to unlock the door into the first room of the library. Here the scholastics have their desks. This is the upper scriptorium. The theology books are all along the walls. Yonder is the broken cuckoo clock, which Father Willibrod winds up each morning with a gesture of defiance just before he flings open the windows. Perhaps the dormitory of the choir monks is the longest room in Kentucky. Long lines of cubicles with thin partitions a little over 6 feet high. Shirts and robes and scapulars hang over the partitions, trying to dry in the night air. Extra cells have been jammed along the walls between the windows. In each one lies a monk on a straw mattress. One pale bulb burns in the middle of the room. The ends are shrouded in shadows. I make my way softly past cell after cell. I know which cells have snorers in them, but no one seems to be asleep in this extraordinary tenement. I walk as softly as I can down to the far west end, where Frater Caleb sleeps in the bell ringer's corner. I find my station inside the door of the organ loft and punch the clock and start off again on soft feet along the other side of the dormitory. There is a door hidden between 2 cells. It leads into the infirmary annex, where the snoring is already in full swing. Beyond that, steep stairs to the 3rd floor. One more assignment before I climb them. The infirmary, with its hot, square little chapel, the room that contains the retreats I made before all the dates in my monastic life, clothing, professions, ordinations. I cannot pass it without something unutterable coming up out of the depths of my being. It is the silence which will lift me on to the tower. Meanwhile, I punch the clock at the next station, at the dentist's office, where next week I am to lose another molar. Now the business is done. Now I shall ascend to the top of this religious city, leaving its modern history behind. These stairs climb back beyond the Civil War. I make no account of the long lay brothers' dormitory, where a blue light burns. I hasten to the corridor by the wardrobe. I look out the low windows and know that I am already higher than the trees. Down at the end is the doorway to the attic and the tower. The padlock always makes a great noise. The door swings back on swearing hinges, and the night wind, hot and gusty, comes swirling down out of the loft with a smell of ancient rafters and old, hidden, dusty things. You have to watch the 3rd step, or your feet go through the boards. From here on, the building has no substance left, but you have to mind your head and bow beneath the beams on which you can see the marks of the axes, which our French fathers used to hew them out 100 years ago. And now the hollowness that rings under my feet measures some 60 feet to the floor of the church. I am over the transept crossing, If I climb around the corner of the dome, I can find a hole once opened by the photographers and peer down into the abyss and flash the light far down upon my stall in choir. I climb the trembling, twisted stair into the belfry. The darkness stirs with a flurry of wings high above me in the gloomy engineering that holds the steeple together. Nearer at hand, the old clock ticks in the tower. I flash the light into the mystery which keeps it going and gaze upon the ancient bells. I have seen the fuse box. I have looked in the corners where I think there is some wiring. I am satisfied that there is no fire in this tower, which would flare like a great torch and take the whole abbey up with it in 20 minutes. And now my whole being breathes the wind, which blows through the belfry, and my hand is on the door through which I see the heavens. The door swings out upon a vast sea of darkness and of prayer. Will it come like this, the moment of my death? Will you open a door upon the great forest and set my feet upon a ladder under the moon and take me out among the stars? The roof glistens under my feet, this long metal roof facing the forest and the hills, where I stand higher than the treetops and walk upon shining air. Mists of damp heat rise up out of the fields around the sleeping abbey. The whole valley is flooded with moonlight, and I can count the southern hills beyond the water tank and almost number the trees of the forest to the north. Now the huge chorus of living beings rises up out of the world beneath my feet. Life singing in the watercourses, throbbing in the creeks and the fields and the trees, choirs of millions and millions of jumping and flying and creeping things. And far above me, the cool sky opens upon the frozen distance of the stars. I lay the clock upon the belfry ledge and pray, cross-legged with my back against the tower, and face the same unanswered question. Lord God of this great night, do you see the woods? Do you hear the rumor of their loneliness? Do you behold their secrecy? Do you remember their solitudes? Do you see that my soul is beginning to dissolve like wax within me? Clamabo per diem, et non exaudies, et nocte, et non ad incipientiam mihi. Do you remember the place by the stream? Do you remember the top of the vineyard knob that time in autumn, when the train was in the valley? Do you remember McGinty's Hollow? Do you remember the thinly wooded hillside behind Hannecamp's place? Do you remember the time of the forest fire? Do you know what has become of the little poplars we planted in the spring? Do you observe the valley where I marked the trees? There is no leaf that is not in your care. There is no cry that was not heard by you before it was uttered. There is no water in the shales that was not hidden there by your wisdom. There is no concealed spring that was not concealed by you. There is no glen for a lone house that was not planned by you for a lone house. There is no man for that acre of woods that was not made by you for that acre of woods. But there is greater comfort in the substance of silence than in the answer to a question. Eternity is in the present. Eternity is in the palm of the hand. Eternity is a seed of fire whose sudden roots break barriers that keep my heart from being an abyss. The things of time are in connivance with eternity. The shadows serve you. The beasts sing to you before they pass away. The solid hills shall vanish like a worn-out garment. All things change and die and disappear. Questions arrive, assume their actuality, and also disappear. In this hour I shall cease to ask them, and silence shall be my answer. The world that your love created, that the heat has distorted, and that my mind is always misinterpreting, shall cease to interfere with our voices. Minds which are separated pretend to blend in one another's language. The marriage of souls and concepts is mostly an illusion. Thoughts which travel outward bring back reports of you from outward things. But a dialogue with you, uttered through the world, always ends by being a dialogue with my own reflection in the stream of time. With you there is no dialogue unless you choose a mountain and circle it with cloud and print your words in fire upon the mind of Moses. What was delivered to Moses on tables of stone as the fruit of lightning and thunder is now more thoroughly born in our own souls as quietly as the breath of our being. The hand lies open. The heart is dumb. The soul that held my substance together like a hard gem in the hollow of my own power will one day totally give in. Although I see the stars, I no longer pretend to know them. Although I have walked in these woods, how can I claim to love them? One by one I shall forget the names of individual things. You who sleep in my breast are not met with words, but in the emergence of life within life, and of wisdom within wisdom. You are found in communion, thou in me, and I in thee, and thou in them, and they in me. Dispossession within dispossession, dispassion within dispassion, emptiness within emptiness, freedom within freedom. I am alone. Thou art alone. The Father and I are one. The voice of God is heard in paradise. What was vile has become precious. What is now precious was never vile. I have always known the vile as precious, for what is vile I know not at all. What was cruel has become merciful. What is now merciful was never cruel. I have always overshadowed Jonas with my mercy, and cruelty I know not at all. Have you had sight of me, Jonas, my child? Mercy within mercy within mercy. I have forgiven the universe without end, because I have never known sin. What was poor has become infinite. What is infinite was never poor. I have always known poverty as infinite. Riches I love not at all. Prisons within prisons within prisons. Do not lay up for yourselves ecstasies upon earth where time and space corrupt, where the minutes break in and steal. No more lay hold on time, Jonas, my son, lest the rivers bear you away. What was fragile has become powerful. I loved what was most frail. I looked upon what was nothing. I touched what was without substance, and within what was not, I am. There are drops of dew that show like sapphires in the grass as soon as the great sun appears, and leaves stir behind the hushed flight of an escaping dove.